My name is Hafiz Al-Mirazi, Director of Adham Center for Television at the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, AFC of course. I am honored here to be inviting and hosting Dr.Shibley Telhami, our guest, and actually on behalf of Ambassador Nabil Fahmi, the Dean of the school, who is not able to be with us because of his travel out of town. I am given that honor to introduce Dr. Shibley Telhami, who just reminded me of how long did we know each other in Washington when I used to work there for about 24 or 25 years. Of course, I did go to Washington when I was like a kid, 5 years old or something, to explain why I spent 25 years and I'm still young. It was, I think, 1996 or 1997 when I met Dr. Shibley Telhami. And he's still in the same position that he was in at that time, academic-wise, but of course there are so many things and achievement that Shibley Telhami has done, and all of us know what he's doing. I always tell Egyptians that the only person, even Egyptians, who is not related to the family of Sadat, but his name is so linked to the name of Sadat and Anwar Sadat, is Shibley Telhami, because Shibley Telhami is the Anwar Sadat Professor for Peace and Development at the University of Maryland, College Park. And he's a non-resident senior fellow at the Saban Center at the Brookings Institution. Before coming to University of Maryland, he taught at several universities, including Cornell, Ohio State University, Southern California, Princeton University, Columbia, and so on. Professor Telhami has also been active in the foreign policy arena. He has served as advisor to the U.S. mission to the UN 1990-1991, advisor to the delegation of the trilateral U.S.-Israeli-Palestinian Anti-Incitement Committee, which was mandated by the White River Agreements. And of course, he was also an active member of the U.S. Advisory Group on Public Diplomacy, among other commissions and task forces. Iraq is one of them. His best-selling book, The Stakes, America and the Middle East, 2004, was selected by Foreign Affairs as one of the top 5 books on the Middle East in 2003. His other publications include Power and Leadership in International Bargaining, and also A Decade of Reflections on Peace. Of course, Dr. Telhami writes to many major newspapers and also appear on radio and televisions, not just in the US, but of course in the Arab world like Al Jazeera and Arabiya and others. The lecture today and his speech is about, or is entitled, Historic Developments in Egypt, a View from Abroad, with special emphasis on the US role. And of course, if someone read the words historic developments in Egypt, you would think that he's coming to tell us about the pharaohs and building of pyramids and stuff like that. But actually, he's talking about the present, these days, because it is historic, and although we abused the word historic to many things, including any speech that our president used to give that you consider historic, but we would like to reclaim the word historic and keep it to things that really deserve it. And of course, Egypt is witnessing something historic, as Tom Friedman, one of the people who really didn't think highly of a lot of what Arabs did or was doing. I think he himself, including his appearance with me of one of my shows on Arabiya 10 days ago, that he's really reconsidering all what he thought about the Arab world and the stereotypes about the Arab world or the Egyptians because of what happened that took place in Egypt, to the point that he's talking about BE and the AE, before Egypt and after Egypt, that we have now to mark history. Without too much, I would like to really invite Dr. Telhami to speak, especially that he told me that, and I did read as one of the first writings he did, starting with the revolution in Egypt. He talked about Osama's nightmare, and also he's worried about Osama's nightmare that is a sweet dream now for Obama might become an Obama's nightmare in the future if Washington really doesn't do something major, not just little steps, in order to be at the same challenge or the same magnitude of the challenge that happened in Egypt. So let's listen to Dr. Telhami, and I'd like to welcome him, please.
Thanks so much. It's really an honor for me to be here and to have Hafiz Narazi introduce me. Hafiz is an old friend, one of the people I always admired among Arab journalists in Washington, and I've dealt with him multiple times and appeared on Al Jazeera TV, and I've often take the pleasure of having him participate in many of the events that we have in Washington and elsewhere. I'm here really not to talk, I'm here in Egypt to listen, because obviously the Egyptian people have spoken in such a powerful way that it was heard all over the world, and I heard it and everyone else heard it, and I'm here to learn far more than to talk. But what I would like to do is just give you a little bit of my impressions, first in terms of how Washington is seeing the events in Egypt and elsewhere in the region, and also a little bit of my own interpretations of what Hafiz called the historic events. In my own judgment, they may be even more historic than some people assume, and I think they're more regional than people assume. And I will talk about that a little bit, particularly given the research that I've been doing across the region for the past decade, and in tracing public opinion in the public opinion polling that I do. But let me start with Washington. And here I want to talk a little bit more about how the public discourse in Washington viewed the events, how government officials viewed the events, and to some extent how academics viewed events, because we really have a not the same reaction across the board. It all started with Tunis. And there's no question that Tunis captured the imagination already. Not on the same scale that Egypt did, because obviously Tunis is not seen as being strategically very important to the US. The American people didn't know much about Tunis. And frankly, the public discourse itself, to the extent that it had focused on Tunis, the big story was WikiLeaks that preceded the events in Tunis. WikiLeaks was a big story in America because obviously it had to do with America. It was about leaking classified American documents. And if you recall, the first batch of documents that came out of WikiLeaks had to do with the Middle East primarily. So these were front page stories in America. WikiLeaks was a front page story in America, regardless of Tunis. But Tunis happened to be one of the stories that was played up in the WikiLeaks, particularly describing Bin Ali and the regime as a mafia. It was one of the big headlines. So there was kind of a little bit of an interesting kind of perception change that happened toward the Tunisian regime prior to the uprising, which in some ways turned the tide against the regime in the American public opinion. Those who follow, don't get me wrong, not everybody reads even front-page stories anymore in the US, but I'm talking about primarily the elites and the political class in the US, particularly around Washington, the Washington elites who matter a lot for policy making. And so in some ways, when the uprising emerged in Tunis, it was fascinating because people were already rooting against the mafia, so you already have something, and it's not a strategically important country, so people didn't have so much at stake seemingly in protecting a regime. And then you have what appeared to be a non-ideological, peaceful uprising in Tunis that captured the imagination. And when it succeeded, people started paying attention. So First, the initial reaction to Tunis were positive in the American political class because of these things that I said. There was a little bit of beginning of a worry and concern about the Muslim Brotherhood and whether or not they will exploit the vacuum that might emerge in Tunis. But in Tunis, things moved so quickly and formed a government so quickly that people assumed that that's not likely to happen